Hey, everybody. Welcome back
Everybody.
to another episode of the Bulletproof Dental Practice podcast. Today, we have a returning guest with us, Brannon Moncrief. And last time he was on, we spoke a little bit about his involvement in dent appraisals, and we talked about kind of the valuations and what gives value there. But he also is a partner in McLaren and Associates, which is a brokerage firm in Texas, and a leader in DSO transactions. So today we are going to talk about straight talk about DSOs, about DSO transactions. And it's a hot topic right now in the industry. And yeah, I think it's pretty timely, because Brandon, we've had some conversations, some emails back and forth, and you just say it's an interesting time in the industry, and you're seeing it firsthand because you're representing some people, right? But anyway, before we get into it, Brandon, welcome back. Welcome for having you back on the show.
Thank you.
And yeah, I'm excited for this one because there's some questions even I have about some DSO stuff going on.
Absolutely. Certainly a hot topic.
So let's jump into it. Craig, you got any questions, Craig?
But no, I mean, I'm excited to learn. Pete's always sharing different things with me. He shared something the other day with me that I love the term I want to add. I didn't see the full list of questions yet, but one thing I want to put a pin in for today, I'm sure Pete, you're already on it, but the duct taped DSO. I want to talk about that. The duct tape DSO. So, Brandon, I want to steal your fire, but excited to have you here and excited to learn.
So, Brandon, give some context about kind of what you're seeing. That just that a lot of doctors are getting googly-eyed about DSO exits and transactions, and everyone's hearing about these monster multiples. But can you share some of your experience and why sometimes we need to pump the brakes?
Yeah, absolutely. So up until a few years ago, we weren't involved really in any DSO transactions. I mean, we were trying to keep private practice private, and most of our seller clients were not really interested in broaching the topic of selling to a DSO. We didn't even want to bring it up because most of them weren't interested in selling out to corporate, but we've definitely seen a shift in that mindset over the past few years. And we've had to make a shift in our business and evolve to educate ourselves on, what DSOs are looking for, how those transactions are structured, and why our clients might want to consider going that route. So it's been an interesting evolution just in a very short period of time, whereby most of our clients weren't even open to selling to DSOs. And now we're getting phone calls daily from doctors that are being heavily solicited and courted by DSOs and sometimes other brokers that are pushing them that direction, and they're wanting to know more about it. And I think that shift in mindset has been caused by several things. I mean, some of it's financial. There's been there's a gap between what private buyers will pay for practices versus what DSOs will pay for practices. And some of it, I think, has an emotional aspect to it, whereby, we're seeing a lot of seasoned practice owners practice later and later into their career. They're happy to offload the management responsibilities, but they want to remain a dentist, and they want to go back to doing what they love, and that's taking care of patients and not managing the business aspects of the practice. So you've got financial incentives, you've got the ability for doctors that are older to maybe offload the stuff that keeps them up at night and just going back to being a dentist. And I think that's piquing their interest, and it's gotten a little bit more socially acceptable as more and more of their colleagues have sold to DSOs. Selling out to corporate, quote unquote, is a little bit easier for them to stomach, and maybe not as frowned upon as it was at one point in time. And to the DSO's credit, and they're not all created equal, but they have kind of gotten in their lane from a standpoint of realizing that their job is to support practices from a business standpoint and stay out of the clinical side of it and allow the doctor to have the autonomy to, take care of their patients in the proper manner. Along with that, on the young doc side, the buyer side, you've got the millennial mindset where they don't necessarily want to pin themselves down, take on a tremendous amount of debt on top of their dental school debt, and then marry themselves to a single practice or a single location. They're more mobile and open to change than they've ever been before. You've got an increase in dental school graduates, so you've got a consistent workforce for the DSOs to employ. Those graduates have $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in debt. The idea of taking on another $500,000 to $1 million to buy a practice can be intimidating, although they really need to do it and go into more debt if they want to dig themselves out of debt. So you've got all these factors that have created kind of this perfect storm for
one factor I think you left out. I want to add to that, Brennan, is Peter and I always talk about this idea about DSO 1.0, DSO 2.0, and we always talk about this analogy of the DSOs being kind of like the hotel chains. And 10, 15 years ago, all we had was basically La Quinta's, Holiday Inn Express, and Super 8. And now we have Ritz-Carlton and higher level DSOs, more sophisticated DSOs that are actually in some ways making the profession better. They're educating their dentists. They're spending time to energy to make
there's
things better.
maturation in the space for sure, Craig.
Yeah.
We're seeing this, and
they're investing in technology and doing things that a lot of practice owners can't afford to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also, much like the Ritz-Carlton, from what I understand, Pete, you probably speak to this. They don't own the hotel, right? There's a local hotelier that owns the hotel, and they license to Ritz-Carlton and/or Four Seasons. Brennan, you're nodding your head. Yes. Are you aware of that? I think that you license the hotel or something like that.
With some of the chain hotels, the higher end hotels, that's their business model, and you're seeing that in the DSO space as well, where they've got a local partner or somebody that's retained equity type thing, and retained a brand locally.
Brandon, I have a question. There is this massive disconnect, I think, in valuations, and we touched on this last time, but right. So we have this thing where you're hearing DSOs are paying 200% of top line revenue, right? Not factoring. I know. Just bear with me for a second, right? That's a headline, and then you have the solo practitioner offices that you can acquire, and it's like, hey, practices goes for 70 to 85% of top line revenue. So this massive disconnect. I guess my question is, at what point, because that 200% that I alluded to doesn't really apply to the mom and pop practice sub $1 million. It's not until you get to scale where you start getting multiples of 6, 7, 8 times EBITDA. So I guess my question is, like, why is there this massive, do you feel like that is why everyone is trying to grow and expand? And you feel like it's incumbent upon us, if we really want to have an exit one day, it's incumbent upon us to grow, to get to scale, so that you can realize these headlines that people are talking about?
Yeah. So where's the tipping point? The tipping point is normally about 1.5 million in revenue, where the difference between the private buyer marketplace, the traditional dental lender back transaction is far less than what a DSO will pay. And that's when you hit EBITDA of about, let's call it 350, 400,000 or more.
Yep.
Is where the DSO valuation starts to really run away from the private buyer
traditional valuation. Is that
Correct.
Because they want a platform, like essentially it's almost as easy to buy a giant practice as it is onboarding a small practice?
It's actually harder to onboard a small practice than it is a large practice. And that's because you're talking about practices that have more sophisticated systems, staff, probably doctors with expanded skill sets. Look, in my world, it's actually a tremendous amount of work to get a $500,000 transaction done. Tremendous amount more work than it is to get a $5 million transaction done.
Interesting. But by the way, I want to just also take a small break to because we're using a lot of dental terms that Pete and I oftentimes use, and probably the three of us use interchangeably. But I just want to break down for the listener that may not be familiar with what we're talking about. EBITDA is an acronym for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. It's basically your net operating revenue. It's taking your top line revenue. Let's say you make $1 million a year, and everything that's left as profit, minus out a couple factors. But for the sake of the conversation, we can call it net profit. One distinction, and we're going to go deep into this at our summit, is that your net profit for most dentists, they do not pay themselves to work in the practice.
But Craig, to put a pause in there.
Okay.
So when you are factoring this in, because sometimes we forget about the car insurance that we ran through and the meals, like all
Right.
that stuff is backed out and does go apply to the EBITDA. Like so you ask yourself when you're looking at your financial statement, and we're going to talk about some of these P&Ls, and Brandon, you're going to be at the summit as a sponsor, so we thank you, but we're going to be talking about like kind of unpacking reading financial statements of P&L. So you can actually see like, okay, you can actually almost extrapolate what your EBITDA would before even doing. You can say, look.
And by the way, your production does not belong anywhere on your P&L. So when we start talking to dentists, and Brent, I'm sure you know this, I want to help people, and people say, well, yeah, I produce 1.5 and blah, blah, blah. And my overhead's blank and I make this. I'm like, okay, so what do you pay yourself? What do you collect? Oh, well, I collect only $1 million, but why does that matter? I'm like, because it doesn't touch your fucking bank. Like, it's like saying like I caught like a 50, pound snapper. No one saw it. Like it didn't happen. So like, don't, we are not helping the profession by using terms that are not universally accepted. So just I'll let you go back into this, but I just want to say this. So the EBITDA, you got to look at about your net profit minus all the stuff you take out, if you do your laundry or whatever.
Take out the owner's benefit, right?
Right. But then also you have to pay yourself. So I meet a lot of dentists that collect $1 million, do not pay themselves anything, and tell me their net profit is 400 grand. But if they had to, of course, but if they had to pay themselves a 25 to 30% of their collections salary, now their net profit goes from 400 grand to 100 grand. So your net profit is everything out as if you were just an employee of it.
Well, and this speaks back to why the separation in the market in valuations happens around 1.5 million, because you really have
revenue.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
You really have to generate revenue of 1.5 million or more to generate substantial EBITDA, because at $1 million of revenue or less, once you pay all your overhead and pay the doctor an industry comp wage, there's not a lot of leftover EBITDA for the corporate.
So what Brennan's saying is you don't have a business. What you're saying is that
that's not what he's saying at all.
Well,
he's saying it's not attractive for an acquisition because it's not worth the time at $200,000 EBITDA level. It's not worth the time of the DSO to onboard them and fold them into the ecosystem for $200,000 of adding to their EBITDA. Am I right, Brandon?
Yeah, that's correct. But Craig, I get what you're saying. I mean, in a sense, from a valuation perspective, from a corporate buyer, from private equity's perspective, if you're not generating substantial EBITDA, your business does not have value to them. That doesn't mean it doesn't have value to you.
Right, but it also indicates, running a business is, I just want to just really kind of hit home because I see this happen too often that there's, and again, nothing wrong with it. I talk to many dentists across the nation that tell me they want to scale their business so that they can make money when they're not working and blah, blah, blah. And listen, LeBron James has a job. It's just a good job. And most dentists have jobs because their businesses don't make money outside of what they do, but there's a really good jobs. They afford them with hundreds of thousands of dollars and great secure lifestyle. But I think it's important to note that you've got to speak the same language as the business people like yourself and what the DSOs speak in order to have an intelligent conversation about your business.
Absolutely. And you really need to control the narrative. And that's where our job comes in. And that's where I get nervous about watching all of these doctors respond to these solicitations from DSOs and let the DSOs take their financials and control the narrative regarding what their EBITDA is. Did they really add back all those discretionary expenses?
Right.
Are they factoring in a real wage? Are they really?
Or are they taking into consideration a one-time thing? Let's say you had to buy something out or pay off a debt.
Right.
They may not know.
And so, Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys act as the advocate for the selling doctor to basically say, I'm in your corner to make sure you don't make idiotic decisions.
That's correct. I mean, step one is to figure out, who you are and what you're trying to accomplish with your business. What's motivating you to even think about selling to a DSO? Is it financial motivation? Is it you're looking for better work-life balance?
Quality
You
of
want to
life, yeah.
offload, quality of life, offload some of the management responsibilities. Are you drowning in debt and that's making it difficult for you to sleep at night? Do you just want to get back to a blank slate and then just have a job and go back to being a dentist? You got to figure that out first. And then if it makes sense to entertain selling to a DSO, all right, well, let's figure out, what is your EBITDA? What is your actual EBITDA, and what is your practice worth?
I like that you actually made everyone pause right there, because I think that, like, Craig, you actually make me you've run that exercise with people. Like, you ask someone why like 3 times, like, well, why do you want to sell? And then why do you want to make money? Right. So you're unpacking like the purpose of why they want to do it.
Well, it's also destination addiction, something that I was just doing a slide this morning. This thing, destination addiction. So one of my buddies who's extremely affluent, and his family is very well known, and he's a good buddy of mine, and he was just sending me this thing and about destination addiction, where it's like, you believe that, you know, if your happiness is tied to a certain thing that you're going to get to, you will actually never get happy, because the happiness has to happen now. And so many dentists and so many of us are a victim to this destination addiction of, if I just get my 3rd and 4th and 5th location, then I get to do this. And it's bullshit. You'll never get happy. And and I know I always go woo-woo on this, but when you talk, and it's probably, you do that all the time, Brendan, why do you want to sell? Well, I just feel like blah, blah, blah. If I could get this, and then I can do this. And people don't really examine why. They just get a bug in their bonnet and they want to do something, or they want to scale because they're listening to Pete talk or me talk, and like, oh, I should have that. I should have, you know, like what Atlanta Dental Spa has. I should have that. And that's the worst reason. If money's your only motivator, if you hijack someone else's vision, you're really likely to get unhappy. So I think it's important to dive into that.
I think money and fear are both 2 bad motivators. And we're seeing a lot of people look to entertain the DSO option because they're scared that corporate dentistry is going to take over the world. And I don't think that's a reality. I don't think that's a good reason to be looking at selling, nor do I think solely.
Well, tell me where your thought is about. Listen, I think take over the world makes it sound like some sort of invasive force, like ISIS or Nazi Germany. Right. But let's talk about where you believe it will. I mean, if you look at dermatology as an example, most people will say it's what? How many percent consolidated? Mid-80s, 90% consolidated?
I don't know. Who knows?
I don't know that it's that far, but it's pretty consolidated.
So where do you think, do you believe that, what's the future of dentistry? What do you believe the future percentage, you know, in 10 years, what percentage of practices will be consolidated by a DSO of some sort?
It's hard to say, because this is all being driven by private equity, and a lot of factors impact private equity.
If you had to guess.
If I had to guess, let's call it maybe 35.
Really? Where are we now?
We're probably somewhere in the 15%.
So you only
range.
Expect a double?
I do.
Okay. Interesting.
I see an acceleration. And personally, you know, I was reading a report the other day, and there's, you know, Heartland just acquired their 1,000th, or I guess affiliated, whatever the hell they say, 1,000th practice. Like, I'm seeing I personally am seeing, maybe it's just because my mind's eyes on it. It is accelerating. There is some acceleration, and currently, but you're saying the tipping point might be up to 30%. It might plateau, because Craig gave a timeline of 10 years, and 10 years is a long damn time.
It's a long freaking time, man.
It is a long time, but you know what's going to happen within the next 10 years is we're definitely going to go through an economic recession. Interest rates, I think, are definitely going to increase. Those things play a major role in how private equity looks at
it's all leveraging
world.
Debt.
Exactly. So it's hard to tell what's going to happen when you're near the tail end of a historic economic expansion.
So let's take out the financial unknowns out of the equation. Okay, let's just have a more philosophical discussion that, you know, yep. I would like to have here. We've got increasing complexities in running a business. You know, certain states are already pushing that envelope pretty far. Like California, it's becoming very difficult to be an employer. You know, there's nuances to California state law that are getting increasingly more complex. You've got DSOs able to leverage the insurance company relationship and get, you know, oftentimes higher reimbursements. You've got DSOs that are able to leverage costs and pay less for certain things. How, if those things, you know, let's just take the financial markets out of it, because no one has that crystal ball. How is it that they won't become the majority? What is it that you believe is going to block that from becoming the majority?
I'm hoping dentists are going to find a solution to that, in the sense that the model is going to evolve into more of a, you know, a group practice model, to where entrepreneurial successful dentists get together and do what you guys are doing and build successful practices and keep them privately owned. I mean, at the end of the day.
Yeah, but not for the purpose of, sorry to interrupt, Brandon, not for the purpose of exiting, which we see so many,
correct.
We see so many people aggregating together from a duct tape DSO standpoint and trying to like leverage, but you're saying from the standpoint of stability over time.
Correct. I mean, at the end of the day, if there's no sellers, the DSO infiltration stops at some point. So, I mean, dentists as a whole
That's an interesting idea.
are in control of your own destiny, whether or not it's 30% or 75%. You guys, hold the key to that answer. And it's if you figure it out on your own or you allow this to happen to your industry, for better or worse.
Yeah, I think
I
that's
see
the
this
most
giant game of musical chairs.
Tell me what that means.
Meaning that no one, like, it's like everyone's like, yeah, let's all do it together. And then like the music's playing and it's like, oh, look at that chair. Like, I don't want to be the one that doesn't get a chair. So I'm going to take this one real quick. Sorry, guys, I'm out. Right. Or
well, that's how everything works. Yeah, everything works.
I know.
There's no fair market value for like any stock. Amazon comes out with some good news and you're like, oh, I'm buying them. And the stock gets inflated up and they have a minor setback and it goes down too far. I mean, that's how the markets react. But I kind of see it differently. I just see, I see other forces at work and I see DSOs evolving to a point that they'll actually do it better than us. I really do. And when I say us, Pete, I'm not saying the dentist that's on the street. I'm talking about you and me. I'm talking you and me. Like I I just see it differently. I don't know when it is. It might not be a 10-year cycle. And this is not a doom and gloom thing. It's actually, I'm feeling optimistic about it, but I see it's an eventuality where they can do it better than we can do it. I just see that as a natural.
From a business perspective, I don't disagree with you.
Think about, sorry, let me just add one more thing, Brandon. But don't lose what you were saying. Cause I just want to say, like, imagine like there's Home Depot. Actually, let's use Starbucks, right?
I knew you were going to use Starbucks.
Well, why? Well,
because you're going to use the mom and pop coffee shop versus Starbucks and how the experience is created at scale.
Right. And it's really, really, Starbucks is really good. Okay. I go to a lot of mom and pops, especially when I travel and I meet some like local guy with a, that looks like he's artistic or whatever. He's like, oh, don't go to Starbucks, go to this place. And I go there and it's inefficient and I'm waiting and there's too much. Is Starbucks the best coffee out there? Not really, but it's the most consistent coffee out there. Mm-hmm. We can all agree that you go to Starbucks in Vancouver versus Starbucks in San Diego versus Starbucks in Florida. It's pretty fucking close. It's really that close. Mm-hmm. And what I worry about in dentistry is our inconsistency, our ability to do it at scale. And I don't know that the consumer understands what we do. Like most consumers just like want to like show up and get a cleaning and get online appointments. And we make our profession so much more complicated. Well, do you do all in four? Do you have CEREC? Do you have this? And I wonder if the consumer, kind of like, the consumer might just be thinking like, shit, I just want to go in on Saturday at 7 p.m. and not have to like give my social security number and fill out 15 forms. I mean, look at what Smile Direct Club has done. We would have thought, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, do I think that there's a threat from a company that's going to go to do it yourself orthodontics? I would have laughed you out of the room. Mm-hmm. The consumer would never want that. And now I know smart people. I mean, you can tell me whether or not you think they're smart, but they actually get Smile Direct Club. They have the money. They just don't want to have to go through all the hoops we're giving them. So I don't know. Brennan, go ahead.
So the private practice model has to evolve if it's going to survive. I mean, at the end of the day, if DSOs aren't going to control the marketplace, then consolidation is not going to get to 80%. Private practice model has to evolve. The individual practice owner has to evolve. The group practice model has to become more important. But again, a lot of it's going to come down to, do the people with large successful practices sell at the end of the day? And today the answer is yes. Because today, with all of the market conditions the way they are, interest rates being low, economy being good, a lot of cash and private equity, the multiples that we're seeing are incredible. I mean, we just sold a practice doing $5 million a year for $13.1 million. Top line, $5 million a year. Enterprise valuation, $13.1 million.
What was the multiple?
Whoa. Yeah.
Sounds crazy, right? But doctor in his young 40s at that point, who's not a seller, right?
Well, tell me the multiple though. Let's unpack that.
The EBITDA on the practice was 1.7 million. So the multiple was,
Damn.
6.5, 6.7. It's hard not to be.
Was this a
seller at
single
that point.
location, Brandon? I want to know the
It was a
characteristics of
two-location.
this. Two
It was
location.
a two location PPO fee for service practice in a good market.
Yep, you're back. Good.
Yep. Sorry
Good
about
market.
that. Good market. It was 4 doctors. EBITDA was off the charts. I mean, 1.7 million EBITDA on $5 million of revenue.
Holy
Is
shit.
That's running a
Are
tight
they all,
ship.
wait, were they all partners, or was it one owner, doc, and associates?
2 partners, 2 associates.
All right. So Brandon, I have a question for that. We're going to stay on this for a second.
I
Is
have
this
multiple questions
because
on this too?
is this because they were in an area that DSO did not have a presence in and wanted to expand in and use this as the flagship? Because that is a reason, a market they're not in, they want to get in and they will pay more.
It sounds like it would be a platform investment for a private equity firm or a DSO that doesn't have, presence in that market, but it actually wasn't. It was an add-on for a DSO that already had a presence in the market and was killing it with the practices they have, and we're looking to expand their model.
Did they bring this deal to you, or did you actually shop this deal and find it for them?
I put this practice under a bid process, took it to the market, shopped it to 12 buyers, and let them tell me what the practice was worth. And I was quite frankly shocked at the valuation that it ended up at.
What, 6.5 you think is so crazy, or you think it's just the number of the valuation to the gross revenue is crazy?
The valuation of gross revenue is crazy, and a 6.5 multiple on a 2-location practice with an EBITDA that can't be really optimized because it's already running at a very, very efficient level.
Doc is crushing his.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to even talk to him because he's crushing his profitability on $5 million. That's amazing.
He's like 1 gauze per patient
only.
Only. And by the way, it feels hot in here. Yeah, our EBIT is 1.7, motherfucker.
Yeah, we don't have
air conditioning. We don't have it. Yeah, in the winter, you get a sweater.
Right. So, but most people are sellers at that level. But let's look at.
Well, what's his future look like? Let's unpack his future now. So he's young 40s. He's not going anywhere. They're not going to give him all the money up front. So he's going to be tied to the practice for
3 to 5 years.
Okay. So now what is he? So the partners are all happy. They're like high-fiving each other. What did you do with the associates?
Associates are retained and
they're staying.
That's
part of the process, Greg.
That's part of the process. Correct.
What do they take there? What are you seeing from after post-acquisition? What are you seeing the seller doctor getting paid as? I know Heartland, meaning as a percentage of their collections, because it goes down, right?
30%. 30% on average. Yeah,
because Heartland's typically doing 25.
Correct. We negotiate an industry, what we feel is a comparable wage, and we bake that into the EBITDA.
Well, Heartland will tell you otherwise. Heartland will tell you, that it's
you get profit sharing. And,
correct. Yeah. So there's a percentage profit. Like if you really boil that down, they would tell you they're at the same percentage.
Okay. Yeah.
But so if economic considerations change though, right? So if something happens in the world where interest rates go up substantially, maybe there's not as much demand from the buyers of 100 location DSOs, which we're already hearing that the multiples on the back end for these large DSOs are starting to decline.
Oh wow!
Let's say interest rates go up. Let's say we hit a recession, and the 6.5 multiple now becomes 4. Well, economically speaking, that client of mine is no longer a seller at 4 times EBITDA.
No, just hang on to his business.
He was a seller at 6.5, but he's not a seller at 4.
Well, it's just it's a purely economic.
Because his cash flow doesn't change, right? His life doesn't change at So you hold on, Brandon.
So long as you're not under duress from a quality of life perspective, you hold on.
The problem is with your practice is like when you look at your net worth and it's illiquid, it's in your practice or other vehicles, you don't know when duress is coming, so it's always a question for that guy is thinking like, oh, well, I could keep growing this. And he's a good operator. He knows what he's doing. He's working his ass off for sure, to create those numbers. Is he doing a lot of dentistry himself?
Yes.
That particular guy? So
it was actually one of the things that was motivating him to sell is, to operate that business that efficiently and sit at the chair all day is damn near impossible.
It's an
but
18-hour day.
exhausting.
It's an 18-hour day.
How
100%.
old is the guy?
Early 40s, and he's got a family. So
Yeah.
Brandon, I have a question. This is actually a personal question. So let's say you're being acquired by let's say you have 4 or 5 locations, right? And you're at that point where you need to develop your own centralized office, your own platform as a group, but that comes with a cost, right? To doing so in consolidation. My question is that's a cost that actually gets burned as an expense, which would then lower your EBITDA, which then a big group buying you would not really give you attribution for that because they have their platform that they're going to loop you in.
Yep. So is
that a sunk cost if you do that?
Well, I mean, if your platform is properly scaled, the problem is what cycle you're on. So like, I'm probably taking some words out of your mouth, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But imagine if you're at your 9th practice and you're like, oh shit, I need to develop a platform and it's C-suite. I need all this stuff. And now you have $400,000 or $500,000 a year allocated to this platform and you're scaling. Then it's going to be, that could be an investment, but it's just depending on your cycle.
It's a long-term investment. If that allows you to get from 9 practices to 15 practices, and that 400,000 allowed you to create another $500,000, $1 million in EBITDA, then it makes perfect sense. So long as you're taking a long-term approach to it, and make sure that when you're building it for the long term. So if you're building it to sell, then maybe it doesn't make sense to make that investment. Maybe it makes sense to go ahead and looking at selling. But if you're going to make that investment, you need to look at it long term. And then when you go to market, when you do eventually sell, if you sell, it comes down to controlling the conversation regarding EBITDA. If you're going to sell to a larger DSO that already has the infrastructure, then when you do your EBITDA analysis on your practice, you need to strip out all your infrastructure.
Yeah.
Otherwise, so that you're probably going to get
it's redundant.
So selling to a larger DSO, when you have that infrastructure, you're going to have to strip it out. And you're likely going to get a lower EBITDA model than if you were selling directly to a private equity firm where your platform is their initial investment in dental. In that case, you're going to keep all that management infrastructure in, but you're likely going to get a higher EBITDA multiple. So you might sell to a larger DSO after stripping out the EBITDA, after stripping out the management at a 6 times multiple, as opposed to you keep the management infrastructure in place, you sell to a private equity firm as a platform investment, and you get a 9 multiple.
I see.
So
it just depends on the buyer.
It depends on the buyer, but you've got to control that conversation, because what do you think if you call a DSO, the large DSO, on your own? What do you think they're going to tell you? Well, they're going to leave it in and try to pay you they're going to leave it in. They're going to pay you a lower valuation and then strip it all out right after they close.
Yeah. That was a niche question that I don't think you would dwell on.
It's a great question.
But it's huge, because they'll penalize you for it in your valuation.
Of course.
And then you'll get this great valuation number. You'll feel good, like, oh, I'm getting an 8.
It's like a catch-22, right?
Yeah, on the wrong numbers.
Well, what we normally do is we'll run 2 different EBITDA analysis, and depending on who we're shopping the opportunity to is which EBITDA analysis they get. If we're shopping it to the private equity firm that's a platform investment, we're going to leave all the management costs baked in and ask for a higher multiple. If it's a larger DSO, we're going to strip out all the management costs, create a higher EBITDA, and maybe we'll accept a smaller multiple because our EBITDA is a lot higher. So it's really all about positioning when you take those opportunities to market.
And then what do you typically charge for all your services that go in as a percentage? Like what do you typically charge?
So the upfront fee is just a valuation fee. It's somewhere between $1,500 and $5,000. We charge typically, 6 to 7% of the sales price of the practice at the time we close.
Okay.
And on average, though, what do you think you add as far as a percentage in dollar valuation? Because if you properly
10 to 20% easy. I mean, if you're responding directly to a DSO marketing campaign, and you're doing a deal in the dark with
And by
no
the way, it's funny
representation.
thing is I've had calls. Pete and I have had calls. Like Pete, like
Sure.
we always take calls, and Pete took this call. I was like, yeah. I'm like, oh, I heard of these guys. I want to talk. I want to talk to those guys too, like just to pick their brain, because we run a podcast. It's like for us, it's like due diligence, even talking to these guys. And I got halfway through the call with this guy, and I'm like, wait, just a quick question: are you actually from ABC DSO, or are you a broker for them? And he's like, oh,
Yep.
I'm a broker. I'm like, oh
Yep.
shit. I'm like, I thought Pete and I both thought we were talking to ABC, and we
Yep.
weren't. So
It's a little, it's a misleading. So that's something to be aware of, people who are listening to this.
Right.
Like, ask them if they're directly, because
So
that's
you could hear a lot about ABC, and ABC is doing cool things. You're like, oh, that's so cool. And then you get a letter saying, hey, my name's John. I work with ABC DSO. Like, oh shit, it's so funny. And it's talking about that. And John is just a broker.
And it's like buying a house. If there's a lot of people involved, someone's going to get paid. And typically, if there's a broker involved that's contacting you, curating your engagement, they're getting paid from what would have been landed. I'm going to get some hate mail on this one. What would probably have landed on your column.
Right.
That's why you need somebody objective, and that's why you have to create competition. The only way to get the best financial result when you're looking to sell to a DSO is you have got to create competition. If they know that they're the only buyer at the table, you're not going to get the best deal, not only from a valuation standpoint, but also from a deal term standpoint. And it's not only financially driven. How do you know if you sold to if you partnered with the right DSO, if you only talk to one? You need to, you need to interview, you need to interview 5, 10 potential buyers so that you can narrow in on who's the right partner for your practice, and then leverage that competitive environment to get the right deal from the partner you want.
And also, listen, since we're talking about this stuff too, it's not just economics as well.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really important to say, like, if ABC wants to give you $1 million and DSO wants to give you 800, that 200 grand or whatever the hell it is, that could be inconsequential to having the wrong cultural fit. Everybody has a different thing. Pete, my practice is similar but different. Every DSO is different as well, and certain DSOs are going to resonate with your values. And there's three compensations: emotion, time, and money. And just because you scored a big deal and you had some upstart PE firm, now you're running around being their platform guy. I mean, that could be very difficult for some dentists. Like, some dentists who are entrepreneurial may link up to a PE firm, and the PE firms are, you're going to be our first, or our office is 1 through 3, and we're going to build 50. And now all of a sudden, like, maybe you practice or you enjoy practicing. Now you're like the guy who's starting a DSO, and starting a DSO, a real DSO, is really freaking hard.
Yeah, but you might get multiple bites of the apple upon recapitalization.
Right, but you've got to know who you are first.
Yeah.
So you might just see dollar signs. PE firm takes you out, and they're like, oh my God, this is going to be great. And yes, you could make double-digit millions, but is that who you are? I was talking to, I had a really interesting patient yesterday, Pete, came in. I probably caught him at a bad day, but I don't believe any meeting is chance. So there's a very large car dealership in this area. And I didn't even realize, I mean, obviously it's the name of a dealership, is there's a name, but I didn't realize there was a Mr. Blank, right? And Mr. Blank comes in yesterday with a shirt with his name on it. And I figured, he doesn't look like a mechanic, but it was basically like, it was a nice shirt, but it had the name of a dealership. And he looked like a really young guy, and he was well dressed. And his wife is doing some big cosmetic treatment. So I was like, hey, do you work with that company? He's like, yeah, my name is Mr. Mike Blank, the name. And I don't want to say the name because there's 15 or 20 dealerships this guy has. And I must have caught this guy in a really bad day. I'm like, dude, did you start that? Like, you seem so young. He's like, yeah, it's all me. I started him, 42 years old. He has 15 or 20 dealerships, different, major fucking dealerships. I was like, I'm like, how you doing? He's like, well, I got to be honest with you, man. It's really hard. And he just kind of opened up to me, because he looked around. He's like, I love what you did with your building. This is incredible. This is inspiring. I've actually taken some things from this building and the way you do things. I want to bring it to my dealerships. So he's like, he respected he respected the game I had. And I obviously knew who he was, but I must've caught him on a bad day. He's like, look, if I could do it all over again, I'd do it very differently. I wouldn't, I had more fun when I had 3 and 5 dealerships.
Yeah.
I was out racing cigarette boats and having fun. Now I have 2 small children. He's 42. He's a very small child. And he's like, I don't see them anymore. I have maybe 18 dealerships. It is so increasingly complicated. And I felt really bad for him. I wound up feeling really bad. He's like, I bought all the cars. I bought all the stuff I ever thought. And I'm really not, I'm not loving my life right now. I don't, and it was really interesting. I probably caught him on a bad day because I was talking this morning.
You've said that 4 times now. We know you caught him on a bad day.
Well, I'm going to say it for the 5th. I might've caught him on a bad day, but it's a cycle that we as humans go through. And I think I coined this. It's like, it's bored to break down. It's a continuum. So we all probably can identify with it. Like, you're kind of bored. You're like, what am I doing? What, I don't have enough
Craig,
stuff
I think
on
this
my
goes
plate.
back, pardon me, this goes back to what you're saying about like the why, and you're getting philosophical, as you ask the philosophical question, like, because if he had asked that question, I think this is probably where you're going, right? If he had asked that question, like, why am I doing this? Right. Am I staying true to what I want for an end goal?
Purpose?
Yeah. What's the purpose? What's the why?
I mean, it's alluring. The purpose is pretty alluring. When a PE guy sends you a letter and says, hey, I respect the ground game you've got. Let's roll this out for 20. And then you got taken out with a bunch of PE guys. And that's pretty alluring. You could actually get your why hijacked is what I'm saying. You could wind up saying, let's roll. I could see myself doing that. I'm sure Brandon, I could speak for Pete. Pete could, we could sit there and like, wow. And that's big numbers. And it's just, there's a sickness that goes on in our culture of the disease of more, and a little bit more can make you that much happy. And shit, if you're happy at 1 million, how you could be 20 times happier at 20 million. And next thing you know, you're down the path. And that's what's cool about having an advisor, whether it's you and me, Pete, on the podcast, or hiring a guy like Brennan, like saying like, what are you trying to get, man? Do you, where are you at? Let's look at the numbers.
And we have those conversations every day. I mean, we're selling. My average client age used to be like 62. Now it's closer to 47, 48. It's because we're selling practices for a lot of guys in that situation that have become victims of their own success. They were happier with a smaller practice or a single location.
And likely more profitable, or
and likely
possibly more profitable. Yeah.
So I was going to touch on that in just a second. But yeah, they're miserable. They're highly successful from the outside looking in, but they're absolutely miserable. They don't get to spend time with their kids. The business is running them. They're no longer running the business. And like you said, Pete, a lot of the times they were more profitable, had a better quality of life with 1 or 2 locations than they did 5 or 6. And that's a fallacy that I think a lot of doctors get themselves into is one, the ego side of it, wanting to have 10, 15 locations and wanting to hold off for that big payday. Well, if you didn't build it right, it may not have value, and that payday doesn't come.
Brennan, I was at a conference recently, and it was like someone was introducing me. I don't remember who it was, but it was like I was speaking, maybe, I can't remember, but there's a whole bunch of like PE guys there, and there's a whole bunch of dentists. And it was literally said like, oh, this is my buddy. And like, how many offices do you have? I'm like, 1. And it was literally, you could feel their energy. They walked away from me. And then someone would say, well, he has a 13,000 square foot office. I'm like, well, I'm sorry. Like there's some sort of like how many offices you have is some sort of like,
badge of honor.
A badge of honor. And it's really unfortunate because it's really about what brings you fulfillment. And I know we're beating a dead horse here, but
I think it just goes down to, comes down to purpose. Why are you going to build your own DSO? Why are you going to build a group practice? Why are you going to look at selling to a DSO? You need to be purposeful in your approach always. And if you're going to build it, you're going to, build an emerging DSO, build it to last. Don't build it to flip. Don't build a duct tape DSO. And we use that term. Don't just acquire practices for the sake of having more storefronts, quote unquote.
Or going in with your buddies, like calling 5 of your buddies and be like, hey, let's just.
Well, I think, and I'm glad we're getting to this because that was actually my last question on my sheet was the duct tape DSO is that I think they're sophisticated buyers, meaning these private equity groups or DSO sophisticated buyers. They know when something has been cobbled together with no semblance of continuity amongst the platform, right? Like Craig, you and I would actually, if we were to merge and like say like we're together, right? Even though our practices, pretty much we do almost everything the same, right? Like we have a lot of continuity between our practices. It would still be looked upon like, not sure if you can get attribution for this entire merger because there's still a lot of work to do. And so you hear about like 4 or 5 buddies who have practices going together and then going to market, and you're like, guys, this ain't gonna work. This ain't gonna work.
Total BS. I mean, and you see brokers out there pitching that model.
Mhm.
Hey, get you and 7 of your buddies. We're going to take you all to market at the same time and sell to the same buyer at an exponentially higher valuation than you could sell on your own. And like you said, these are sophisticated, financially educated people that are going to look at this and say, hey guys, this is real cute, but those 2 over there, we don't even want those 2. And then these 6, we'll buy these 6, but we're going to value them independently because there's no synergies. They're not all the same practice.
Your friends are like, hey, I don't give a shit you got any times value. We're in this together. You know, well, bro, you got a 4 times value. You're dragging me down. No, it doesn't matter. We're 6 together now. You're like, what did I do? What just happened?
Right. Yeah. You've got to be one company to sell at that 10 times EBITDA. You've actually got to be one business, not 10 individual businesses that all decided to say that you were the same business.
I'm glad we addressed this. I really am.
By the way, I get those calls all the time. There was a bunch of guys in the area here, and they're like, "Hey, we want to do this. We're gonna like
join us, Craig. Join us.
Yeah,
Craig.
join us. Just add on, bolt on your EBITDA.
Just bolt it on.
But by the way, you can do it. It's just what happens on the other side of it too.
Brandon, I have a question in kind of closings. I know you got places to be and people to see. Are you going to be at the summit? I know that you guys are sponsoring it, but are you going to be present? Because I know a lot of our listeners, this is going to be, we've got well over 100 people coming to the summit now, and we just sold out the room block. So I know there's going to be people listening to that who are coming to the summit who actually are going to have questions, follow-up questions for you, probably in person. So I'm glad that you're coming in person to be on site, because I know that this is a popular conversation right now, and this is probably resonating with a lot of people who have a lot of questions, and it's fear of the unknown. So anyway, I'm just glad that you're coming.
I look forward to being there, and we're all about education. Right. Look, if this makes sense for you to go down this path, great. Let's figure out how to get you the best fit and the most money possible. But if it doesn't make sense for you, I'm going to tell you that this doesn't make sense, because economically speaking, I mean, if over a 5 to 10 year window, it rarely makes sense to sell your practice to a DSO unless you can get a crazy valuation, or if there's some other motivating factor, it starts to make sense. If it's a quality of life, it's a management burden factor, then okay, let's look at it. But it's got to be purposeful. Like Craig said, don't just have a bad day and respond to that, DSO letter, and before you know it, you sold your business without even putting a lot of thought and purpose into it.
And many dentists that are listening to this have actually never worked for someone before. And psychologically, it's almost like as part of this process, there's you need the financial coach, and it sounds like the psychological coach that you guys are filling into, which is cool, like the values coach, because everybody just, you got to really go in with the eyes wide open.
Yep. And because I'm young, I'm in this for the long run. I mean, from my business standpoint, we do more private party doctor-to-doctor deals than we do DSO deals. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference to me if you sell today or sell 20 years from now. Do what's right for your business. My bills are paid. I'm good.
That's awesome.
I love that.
Well, we're happy about you being at the summit. That'll be cool. Pete, do we still have any spots left at the summit? Or are we fully?
Literally, I don't think so anymore. I don't know, Kim. You'd have to ping info at Bullet. I mean, you'd have to get on the website and ping it. I don't know as of right now.
Well, I'm still going to make a last pitch. If we do, go ahead and check it out. Go to bulletproofdentalpractice.com. And
I know that St. Regis is kind of pretty much sold out at this point, but
you can still go to the summit and stay either out of the room block or at a neighboring hotel. So I'm still encouraging people to come and bring your hygienist. If you haven't brought your hygienist, please consider bringing your hygienist. We're super excited. We get that content. The hygiene alone is going to be worth your price of admission, just the increases in hygiene. Mm-hmm. So it's good stuff.
Awesome. Brandon, anything in closing? That was really awesome, by the way, man.
Yeah, that was really great. Thank you for that.
That was a great chat. But anything else in closing before we wrap?
No, I appreciate the time and look forward to seeing you guys next month in Houston.
Yeah, see you in a month.
Awesome. Take care, guys.
All right. Over and out. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.